My name is Naomi Claire Bennett. I'm 35 years old, and my brother blocked me at the restaurant door with his hand against my chest. Immediate family only, Grant said. Behind him, under a 40 years of love banner. My mother saw me and gave one shake of her head. My father sat inside smiling at an empty chair, waiting for me, not knowing I had paid for every plate, every glass, every candle on that cake. I didn't scream. I found the manager, handed her a leather folder, and whispered, "Give this to Dad when he stands to toast." Then I locked myself in my car and waited for him to read the name buried under my mother's vows. 6 months before Grant put his hand on me, my father slid a cardboard banker's box across his kitchen table and asked me for the one thing I could never refuse him. "Naomi," Dad said, tapping the lid with 2 fingers, "for our 40th, I want a real legacy book, not one of those cute online trees. I want the truth. My people. Your mother's people. Documents, pictures, everything. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family." I made my living doing that exact work. I was a forensic records analyst for probate attorneys. The woman they called when a dead man left behind 3 marriage licenses, no will, and 1 daughter nobody wanted to mention. I found missing heirs. I confirmed divorces. I proved deaths. I knew how to read the silence between documents. So when Dad asked, I smiled and said, "Of course." He looked relieved in a way that hurt me. Thomas Bennett had always loved history, but lately he had started speaking like a man trying to arrange his life before someone else packed it away. He was 71, slower on the stairs, softer around the eyes. "Done right," he said. "That's all I want." My mother was standing at the sink with a dish towel twisted in both hands. Elaine Bennett could make an entire room feel warm without raising her voice. But when Dad said, "Your mother's side too," the towel stopped moving. "Oh, honey," she said. "Too bright. My side is a dead end. Boring farm people and church ladies. Don't bury Naomi in all that." Dad laughed. "Nothing is boring once Naomi starts digging." My mother looked at me then, not lovingly, not sadly, like I had just stepped too close to a locked drawer. Grant was there too, leaning against the counter, checking his phone like family history bored him. He gave a little laugh and said, "Careful, Mom. She'll turn dinner into a court exhibit." Everyone smiled. I didn't, because that was Grant's favorite trick. He wrapped poison in a joke and waited for people to swallow it. For years, he had been telling relatives I was cold, obsessive, married to my job, too busy with dead strangers to care about living family. Back then, I thought he was just cruel. I didn't know he was preparing them not to believe me when the documents started screaming louder than every lie he had ever told at Sunday dinner. I took the banker's box home that night and put it on my dining room table like evidence from somebody else's life. Rain tapped the windows. The lamp made a white circle over receipts, church programs, baby pictures, Navy papers, and my mother's careful handwriting. Most families think secrets hide in dramatic places: locked safes, burned letters, whispered phone calls. They don't. They hide in ordinary boxes under Christmas photos and grocery receipts. I sorted everything by decade. Dad's side unfolded easily, like he had been waiting for someone to write him down. Birth certificates, funeral cards, school records, newspaper clippings from Wilmington so faded they smelled like dust. My mother's side was thinner, too thin. But I told myself that happened all the time. Women were erased from records long before my mother learned how to erase someone else. Then I found the photograph. It was tucked inside a yellow envelope behind my parents' first mortgage papers. A young man stood beside a green pickup near a boat ramp, sun in his eyes, one hand raised like he'd been caught mid-laugh. My mother stood at the edge of the frame, 19 maybe, looking at him with a softness I had never seen on her face for anyone but herself. On the back, in faded blue ink, someone had written Elaine and Walter. Lake Waccamaw, June. Walter Sloan, the dead first husband. Every family has one story everybody knows without anyone telling it twice. Ours was Walter. My mother had married too young. Walter had died in a boating accident before she met my father. No body at the funeral, they said. Because the lake had been cruel. She had been widowed at 24, broken, and Dad had loved her back to life. That was the story. So I opened my laptop and went looking for the death. I searched the state death index. Nothing. County records. Nothing. Newspaper archives. No drowning. No boating accident. No obituary. No funeral notice. Not even a 2-line mention in the local paper. And small towns write down everything, especially tragedy. At first, I blamed bad records. Then I widened the years. 3 years before, 3 years after. I searched alternate spellings. Sloan without the E. Sloan with no E. Walter J.W. Sloan. Nothing. 2 days later, I drove 3 hours to the courthouse near Lake Waccamaw. The clerk pulled boating incident logs, sheriff reports, coroner indexes, even old search and rescue files kept in a basement cabinet that smelled like mildew. She looked at me over her glasses and said, "Honey, nobody named Walter Sloan died on that lake." I drove home with no music. By the time Wilmington's lights appeared, I knew one thing. My mother had not buried her first husband. She had buried the record of him, the next morning, before coffee, before I even brushed my hair. I searched for the one record that should have been louder than death. A marriage. People can vanish badly. Death records get misfiled. Names get misspelled. Small-town newspapers miss things when storms knock out power. But marriage is different. Marriage leaves fingerprints everywhere. A license, a clerk, witnesses, a date written in ink by someone who never imagined a daughter would come looking 40 years later. I found it in less than an hour. Elaine Marie Caldwell and Walter James Sloan. Married in Brunswick County when my mother was 19. The scanned index sat on my screen. Cruel, like it had been waiting for me. I ordered the certified copy immediately, then did what my hands knew how to do. I looked for the ending. If Walter had not died on that lake, then there had to be a divorce. There had to be a petition, a docket number, a judge's signature, some dry little courthouse sentence saying the marriage was dissolved and both people could walk away. There was nothing. I searched Brunswick County. Nothing. New Hanover County, where my mother later married my father. Nothing. Columbus County, where her aunt once lived. Nothing. I widened the years until the timeline stopped making emotional sense. Still nothing. Then I paid for no record searches, the kind where a clerk signs under seal saying they looked and found no divorce. 3 envelopes came back, each one carrying the same quiet bomb. No dissolution of marriage found. The certified marriage certificate arrived on a Thursday. I laid it beside the no divorce letters and the no death confirmation from Vital Records. 4 documents, 4 stamps, 4 different offices telling me the same impossible thing. My mother's first marriage had legally begun, and nowhere I could reach had it legally ended. I sat at my table while the refrigerator hummed and rainwater ticked in the gutter, and for the first time, I understood what this meant for Dad. If Elaine was still Walter's wife when she stood in that church with Thomas Bennett 40 years ago, then my parents' marriage might not be wounded. It might not have existed at all. And my father was planning to toast it in July. I decided to ask my mother the way you touch a bruise you are afraid is broken. Sunday dinner smelled like pot roast, burned onions, and the lemon cleaner she used when she wanted the house to look innocent. Dad was in the living room with the game low. Grant had not arrived yet, which felt like the first mercy all week. Mom handed me a cutting board and a bag of carrots. Same kitchen, same yellow light, same woman who had packed my lunches and signed every birthday card with a heart. I kept my voice soft. Mom, I'm trying to place Walter correctly in the legacy book. Do you remember which lake the accident happened on? Her knife stopped. Not slipped, not paused, stopped. The silence between us changed shape. She didn't look at me when she said, "Why would you ask that? I just can't find the record." That made her turn. Her face had no sadness on it, no widow's grief, no old wound reopening, just fear, sharp and ugly, gone almost as soon as I saw it. "Some things stay buried because they're supposed to," she said. Dad called from the next room. "Everything okay in there?" Her smile came back so fast it scared me. "Just family history." "Honey," she sang, "Naomi's making us famous." I stood there with a carrot in my hand and realized my mother could change faces between one breath and the next. 2 hours later, Grant called. He never called unless he wanted control documented nowhere. "Mom's upset," he said. "You need to stop." "How do you know what I asked her?" A tiny pause. "She tells me everything." Then his voice went smooth. "She lost a husband. Naomi, don't turn her grief into one of your courthouse obsessions." I said nothing, because Walter was supposed to be dead. So why did my brother sound like he was guarding a living man somewhere? Aunt Marnie cracked the next door open by accident, with a half-empty glass of Chardonnay in one hand and a cigarette in the other. She was my mother's younger sister, a woman who remembered everything but only told the truth after 8 o'clock. I stopped by her duplex 2 days after Sunday dinner, pretending I needed names for the legacy book. Rain slid down the kitchen window, her dog snored under the table. Marnie looked at Walter's photograph on my phone and made a sound like she had swallowed a nail. "Lord," she whispered, "I haven't seen that face in years. So you remember him." She waved smoke away. Everybody remembered Walter. Sweet boy. Too sweet for Elaine, if you ask me. I kept my breathing steady. "Did you go to his funeral?" Her eyes narrowed, confused. "What funeral?" The refrigerator clicked on behind us. I said, "Mom always said there wasn't much of one because of the accident." Marnie let out a bitter little laugh. "Naomi, there wasn't a funeral at all. Your mother came back from one of her trips and said it was over. We were told not to ask." One of her trips. The cigarette trembled between her fingers. She looked older. "Oh, honey, you didn't hear that from me." But I had. I drove home with my hands locked around the wheel, and memories rose up like bodies from dark water. 4 times a year. My mother disappeared for 2 nights. She called them women's retreats, church weekends, errands for old friends. She packed a small navy bag on Thursday, kissed our heads, and told Dad she had to see about some things. Dad made pancakes while she was gone. Grant watched cartoons. I thought it was normal because children accept routines the way they accept weather. She always came back Saturday afternoon, tired, quiet. She went straight to her bedroom, closed the door for exactly 1 hour, then came out smelling like lavender soap and acted like nothing had happened. 4 times a year. Quarterly. That word hit me so hard I had to pull over. At home, I went back to the banker's box, but not for photographs, for check registers, boring little books people throw away, because they do not know boring things confess. My mother had kept decades of household payments in tight blue handwriting. I read them in order: mortgage, electric, groceries, church donation. Then, 1 year after Walter supposedly died, a new line appeared. Up a U.S. Care. 3 months later, again, U.S. Care. Quarter after quarter, year after year, the initials. The same rhythm as my mother's trips. And later, the handwriting changed. Not hers. Grant's. In the newest registers, the payment no longer came from my parents' account. It came through something our family bragged about at Thanksgiving: the Sloan Memorial Fund. A memorial fund paying for care. For a dead man. I tried to tell Dad first. That is the part I need you to understand before this gets ugly. I did not want a scene. I did not want a table full of cousins gasping into wine glasses. I called my father on a Tuesday and asked him to meet me for lunch. Just us. At the little diner near the river, where he still ordered coffee like it was 1982. He sounded happy. "Just us girls and old men," he said. "I'll bring the stories your mother edits out." We set a time. The lunch never happened. That morning, Mom called before 9. Her voice was sweet enough to rot teeth. "Your father isn't feeling well. Don't come by today. I'll call him. He's sleeping. Then I'll leave a message." The sweetness disappeared. "Naomi, stop pulling him into this." The line went dead. I sat there with my phone in my hand, listening to my own pulse. They were not just hiding Walter anymore. They were building a wall around my father, brick by brick, using concern as mortar. So I went where they could not block the door: public records. The Sloan Memorial Fund was real, registered nonprofit, annual filings, officers, disbursements. The boring paperwork families wave around at holidays when they want to look generous. Grant was listed as treasurer in his careful accountant handwriting. I drove to the state office and pulled every filing they had: The clerk printed them at 10 cents a page while fluorescent lights buzzed over my head. I sat at a scarred wooden table and read backward from the money. Scholarship fund? No. Church donation? No. Memorial garden? No. Year after year? Quarter after quarter? The payments went to one place, Briar Glen Memory Care, a long-term facility in Georgia, 2 states away, the same distance my mother could drive on a Thursday, sit for an hour, and be home by Saturday with lavender soap on her skin. The beneficiary line appeared on the most recent filing, signed by Grant that spring. Walter J. Sloan, current resident care, and my brother had signed his name beneath that truth too. I read it once, then again, then a third time, because my mind refused to let the words become real. You do not pay current resident care for a dead husband. You do not sign a spring filing for a man who drowned 40 years ago. Walter Sloan was alive. Alive in a memory care facility while my father planned a toast to 40 years of marriage. Alive, and hidden so completely he could no longer tell anyone he existed. That was the moment the mystery stopped being history. It was still happening. Once I had Walter's name on a current filing, I stopped trusting my own shock and started doing what I did for paying clients. I built a file, not a theory, not a family rumor with prettier paper, a file. I printed the marriage certificate first. Elaine Caldwell and Walter Sloan. Signed, witnessed, sealed. Then the no divorce letters, then the no death confirmation, then every annual filing from the Sloan Memorial Fund, oldest to newest, stacked in order like a slow confession. Briar Glen Memory Care was real, licensed, inspected, operating for decades outside Savannah, Georgia, with a small courtyard and pale brick walls in the photos online. I did not call and pretend to be family. I did not trick a nurse. Memory care residents deserve privacy, even when the people around them deserve exposure. I used the public trail. The fund's disbursement pages named Walter as the resident beneficiary. The payment dates fell every 3 months, March, June, September, December. When I laid them beside the dates from Mom's old check registers, the pattern clicked so hard I felt it in my teeth. The same weeks, the same trips, the same 2 nights away. My mother had been driving to Georgia 4 times a year, sitting with the husband she told us was dead, then coming home to my father and letting him kiss her at the door. I thought that was the worst part. Then I found Grant. At first, his name was just where I expected it: treasurer, preparer, responsible officer, neat, professional, useful. Exactly the way Grant liked to look on paper. But in the last 5 filings, under expenses, there was a line I had almost missed. Administrative fee, paid to Grant Bennett, every year. Not huge enough to scream, just steady enough to matter. A few $1,000s here, a few thousand there, tucked between facility payments and filing costs like a napkin hiding a stain. I sat back from my desk and whispered, "You got paid." My brother had not spent 4 years protecting Mom because he was loyal. He had built a little salary out of Walter's disappearance. He was the accountant of a living ghost. And Walter, according to the facility category listed beside the payments, was now in advanced memory care. That detail hollowed me out. A man that sick could not walk into a courtroom, could not call my father, could not point to my mother across a restaurant and say, "I was here first." He was alive, but unable to testify to his own life. That was the cruelty hidden under all the clean accounting, so I made the file tighter. Because Grant could spin me, he could not spin his own signature anymore. There was only one person left in the family who had never swallowed Grant's version of me. My cousin Rachel. She was Aunt Marnie's daughter. Quiet. Sharp-eyed. The kind of woman who noticed who cleaned up after dinner and who only smiled for credit. She had texted me through years of being called difficult. Not advice, not questions, just, "I see you." I called her 3 days before the anniversary dinner. "Rachel," I said, staring at the file spread across my desk, "I need you to sit near Dad." She went silent. Then, softly, "Something bad is coming, isn't it? Just sit near him. Keep your phone close." I did not tell her about Walter. I would not hand that truth to anyone before my father had to carry it. All I asked for was one honest witness in a room trained to look away. Grant moved faster after that. He called relatives with that gentle, worried voice people mistake for love. He told them I was under stress, that my work had gotten into my head, that I was saying strange things about Mom. Be kind to her, he said, but don't take everything seriously. He was vaccinating the room against me. Then he called the harbor room and tried to move the reservation into his name. The manager called me because my card was on file. Do you authorize Mr. Bennett to make changes? No, I said. Discuss this account with no one but me. That was when I understood the shape of my revenge. I could not stand up at that dinner and speak. Grant had already poisoned every ear, so I would say nothing. I would let sealed certificates, public filings, and his own signature walk into that room without me and finish the sentence cold. That week, I learned how heavy truth can feel when it has nowhere merciful to land. The file sat on my dining room table in perfect order, and I hated it for being perfect. Marriage certificate, no divorce, no death, nonprofit filings, Grant's signature. Every page was clean, stamped, dated, undeniable. It looked professional. It felt like a weapon. For 3 nights, I barely slept. I kept picturing Dad at the head of that anniversary table, lifting a glass to 40 years. His eyes soft on my mother like every hard thing in his life had finally been worth it because she had been beside him. Then I pictured that same glass lowering when he learned beside him had never legally meant what he thought it meant. At 4 in the morning, I pulled my own birth certificate from my filing cabinet and sat on the kitchen floor with it in my lap. The tile was cold through my pajamas. My name looked normal. My father's name looked normal. My mother's name looked normal. But suddenly nothing felt normal. I knew the law did not erase me. A child is still a child. A father is still a father. But little girls do not build their lives on legal footnotes. They build them on wedding photos in hallways, on parents dancing in the kitchen, on the belief that the story told over birthday cake is at least mostly true. Mine wasn't. Before I let that destroy my father, I needed to understand exactly what it was. So I paid a family attorney for 1 hour and gave her the facts as a hypothetical. No names, no drama, just records. She listened without blinking. Then she said, if the first marriage was never dissolved, the second marriage may be void from the beginning, not broken later, void on day 1. The room went very still around me. She explained what that could mean for property, estate issues, good faith spouses, and 40 years of shared life built under a legal shadow. I wrote it down because my hands needed something to do. I did not hire her to fight. That would be Dad's choice. I went there only to know how deep the floor had opened beneath him. When I left, the afternoon sun was too bright, and I sat in my car until my breathing stopped shaking. Then I did the one decent thing left. I went to my mother. Dad had a doctor's appointment that afternoon. I waited until his truck was gone, then knocked on the door of the house where I had learned to ride a bike, cry quietly, and apologize first. Mom opened it with her church smile. I sat across from her at the kitchen table and said, I know Walter is alive. I know where he is. I know about the fund. I know Grant gets paid. Tell Dad before the anniversary. Let him hear it from you. For 1 second, she looked old. Then her eyes hardened. You have always needed a tragedy to feel important, she said. Mom, no. If you say one word, I will tell everyone this job finally broke you. Grant will back me. Your father will believe us before he believes this sickness. She never said Walter was dead. She only threatened me. And that was the last mercy I offered her. The invitation came through a cousin's group text on Monday morning. A gold digital card, 40 years of love, Thomas and Elaine Bennett. The harbor room, cocktail attire, family only. My name was not on it. Not misspelled, not forgotten, removed. Rachel called 5 minutes later, whispering from her office bathroom. Naomi, they told everyone you probably wouldn't come. Grant said you needed space. I looked at the invitation until the gold letters blurred. The party my father thought I was helping plan had become the table they would use to erase me. My mother was going to stand under a banner celebrating 40 years of vows while the living husband she never divorced sat in a memory care room 2 states away. And I was supposed to disappear politely. So I finished the legacy book. I did not make it cruel. That mattered. Cruel would have been easy. I could have written betrayal, fraud, bigamy in red ink across my mother's page. I could have printed Grant's administrative fees in a font big enough to choke him. I did none of that. I built the book exactly the way Dad asked me to. His line, her line, photographs, dates, sources. The beautiful architecture of a family, with no branch cut off because it made someone uncomfortable. On my mother's page, I wrote only what the records supported. Elaine Marie Caldwell, married Walter James Sloan, Brunswick County, 1981. No divorce of record, no death of record. Current living status supported by ongoing care payments. Behind that page, I clipped the certified marriage certificate, the 3 no divorce letters, the vital records no death confirmation, and the most recent Sloan Memorial Fund filing, signed by Grant Bennett. No opinion, no accusation, just evidence. Then I placed everything inside a brown leather folder, the kind restaurants use for the check. Because if my family wanted to celebrate a bill they had not paid, I was going to make sure my father finally saw the real one. The night of the dinner, I dressed like I was going to a funeral nobody had admitted was happening. Black dress, low heels, hair pinned back so my hands would have nothing to fix. The leather folder sat on the passenger seat like a sleeping animal. Every red light felt too long. Every green light felt like permission I did not want. The harbor room glowed, warm windows and dark river reflections through the glass. I saw the private room filling up. Gold balloons, white tablecloths, my parents' wedding song leaking softly from the speakers. On the cake, 2 gold candles leaned over the words 40 years of love. And there was Dad, at the head of the table, turned slightly toward the door, waiting for me. That almost broke me. Not my mother smiling under the banner, not Grant laughing with uncles he had warned about me. My father watching the door because he believed his daughter belonged there. I crossed the street before I could lose my nerve. Grant appeared before I reached the hostess stand. Clean suit, cold eyes. One hand lifted like he had practiced it, his palm pressed flat against my chest. Immediate family only tonight, he said. Don't make this weird. Behind him. My mother saw me for 1 second. Her face tightened. Then she gave the smallest shake of her head. The kind you give a server who brought the wrong drink. I looked past them at Dad. He didn't see me. That was mercy. Move, Grant, I said. He smiled. Still pretending you were invited. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, but my voice came out calm. No, I'm done pretending. Then I stepped back. Not away, back. There is a difference. I found the manager near the coat rack. A young woman in a black blazer who looked like she had already handled 3 disasters. I handed her the leather folder. When my father stands to give his toast, I said, please bring him this. Tell him it's the anniversary gift he asked me for. She looked at the folder, then at my face. Whatever she saw there made her nod without asking questions. I walked back to my car and locked the door. My phone sat on my knee. For 17 minutes, nothing happened. Then Rachel texted, he's standing. My lungs stopped working. Then another message. Manager just gave him something? Then, he's smiling. He thinks it's the legacy book. I closed my eyes and I saw Dad's hands opening the folder. His face lighting up because I had finished what he asked for 1 last second, before the truth rose from the paper. He was proud of me. The next text took forever. Oh my God. Inside. My father had unfolded the first page. Rachel told me later he laughed softly and turned it toward my mother. Elaine, look. Naomi finished it. Then he kept reading. Because Dad reads everything. His smile faded at my mother's line. Elaine Marie Caldwell, married Walter James Sloan. No divorce of record. No death of record. Current living status supported by ongoing care payments. The room went quiet before anyone understood why. He turned the page. Marriage certificate. No divorce letters. No death confirmation. Then the Sloan Memorial Fund filing. Signed by Grant Bennett that spring. Showing current resident care for Walter J. Sloan at Briar Glen Memory Care. Rachel said Dad set the folder down carefully, like it was hot enough to burn the table. Then he looked at my mother. Is he alive? Not loud, not angry, worse. Clear. My mother reached for his sleeve. Thomas, is he alive? Elaine? She did not say no. That silence was the confession. Grant moved first. Of course he did. Dad, come on, he said. This is Naomi, You know how she gets. She's twisting records again. We can talk privately. He reached for the folder. Dad put his hand flat on top of it, the same way Grant had put his hand on me. This is your signature, Dad said. Grant froze. Is this your signature? 40 relatives stared at my brother's name in my brother's handwriting. For once, the accountant had no numbers to hide behind. He said nothing. Dad looked around the room then. The banner, the cake, the candles. My mother crying without tears. My brother silent beside her. 40 years, he said quietly. And you let me toast to 40 years. Then he picked up the folder, walked past all of them, and left his own anniversary dinner. A minute later, my passenger door opened. Dad got in, holding the legacy book against his chest. Neither of us spoke. Behind the restaurant windows, 40 years kept falling. Dad sat in my passenger seat with the leather folder pressed to his chest like somebody had handed him the last warm thing from a burning house. For a long time, neither of us moved. Through the restaurant windows, I could see shapes behind the gold balloons. My mother was at the table. Grant hovered near her shoulder, trying to turn silence into damage control. But inside my car, there was only the tick of the engine cooling and my father's breathing. Finally, he said, "You knew." "I found out," I whispered. "I tried to tell you alone. Lunch, calls, they stopped me." He nodded once, slow. "I know." Those 2 words broke me more than anger would have. It meant some part of him had already felt the walls going up around him. The missed messages. Grant appearing every time I came near. Dad looked down at the folder again. "Georgia," he asked. "Yes." "The whole time?" "Yes, Dad." He closed his eyes. When he opened them, he did not look like a man planning revenge. He looked like a man trying to stand inside a life that had lost its floor. Then he said something I will love him for until the day my own name is written in that book. "Then I need to go see him. Walter Gian. Before lawyers, before your mother, before I decide what kind of man I am after tonight." His voice cracked, but did not break. "There is a living man in a room somewhere, and my comfort was built over him. I need to stand in that room." I did not drive him 400 miles that night. A 71-year-old man does not lose 40 years over dessert and then cross 2 states before midnight. I took him to a hotel because he would not go home, and we sat under yellow lobby lamps while strangers laughed by the elevators like nothing had changed. He asked me once, "Was any of it real?" I said the only honest thing left. "I don't know how to measure love. Dad, I only know records." He looked at the folder. It was real to me. Then his mouth twisted with something too tired to be a smile. Maybe that's the cruel part. 2 weeks later, we drove to Georgia. Briar Glen Memory Care sat behind magnolia trees off a quiet road outside Savannah. It looked peaceful, like everyone inside had already lost something they could not name. Walter Sloan was thinner than the photograph. Time had taken the laughing young man by the lake and folded him into an old body with spotted hands and cloudy blue eyes. He looked up when we entered, polite, empty, kind. "Morning," he said, though it was afternoon. Dad stopped in the doorway. For 1 second, I thought he might turn around. He didn't. He walked to the chair beside Walter's bed and sat down like he had been expected. "Mr. Sloan," Dad said softly. "My name is Thomas Bennett." Walter smiled. "That's a good name." Dad nodded like Walter had given him a gift. They sat together for 2 hours. Dad did not ask for memories Walter could not reach. He just held the old man's hand while the television murmured and sunlight moved across the floor. Near the end, Dad leaned close and said, "I'm sorry it took me 40 years to know you were here." Walter squeezed his hand. Maybe because he understood. Maybe because kindness survives when memory doesn't. On the windowsill, I saw a photograph. The same one, Walter by the boat ramp, young and squinting in the sun. My mother at the edge of the frame looking at him like forever was still available. My mother had taken my copy from the box. Walter had kept his. For 40 years. They had held the same afternoon for different reasons. One to remember, one to bury. A nurse told us a woman had visited 4 times a year, always for 1 hour, leaving an envelope at the desk. Dad listened and only said, "At least she came." That was my father. Even in the ruins, he searched for one tender splinter. After that, He handled his life quietly. His lawyer, his house, his accounts, his decisions. I will not steal those from him by turning them into entertainment. I will only say this: Grant is no longer treasurer of the Sloan Memorial Fund. Administrative fees around a hidden living man do not stay private once the state reads the filings. My mother told relatives many things: grief, survival, complication, privacy. Maybe some of that was true. Records do not hold the heart's panic, but they do hold marriages, payments, signatures, and the name of a man everyone agreed not to count. Months later, Dad borrowed Walter's photograph with the facility's permission. I had it restored and placed it in the legacy book on Walter's branch, where a face belongs. Not revenge, restoration, because my family called me cold for loving the truth more than comfort. But comfort is how people disappear. Comfort is how a living man becomes a sad story and a daughter becomes too difficult to invite. Dad kept it. Sometimes he touches that page and says, "The real number." And I know what he means. 40 years was not the real number. The real number was one erased man, one lied to husband, one daughter at the door, and one signature that finally counted them all. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, subscribe. This story isn't over.